Thank you very much, Chairman Santos. At this time, I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank everybody for your comments during public portion. Thank you for taking the time to even log on tonight, and whether you plan to speak or not, even to have the courage to speak.
I do apologize, Dr. Conway. I see 3 people on the video, and if you just raise your hand for people who don't know you on who's speaking, because there's
Absolutely.
3 people, we can't see the lips moving.
That's a great point, Chairman.
Thank you.
And sitting to my right, on your left, is our business manager, Robbie Trainer. And to my left, your right, is our director of teaching and learning, Dr. Rafferty.
Thank you very much. For those who don't know who you are, thank you very much.
And at this point, if the chairman allows, I'll share my screen and we can begin our presentation.
Yep, go right ahead.
For the just for the record, Mr. Carloni has entered the meeting at 6:26.
Thank you, Mark.
Welcome, Mr. Carloni.
Hello.
Thank you, Chris, for coming to the meeting.
I'm sorry I'm late.
Oh, you're okay. Thank you.
So we're going to begin by going through some of the data in the district. It's always important to see where the funding is going, answer some questions I think that have been raised over the past week, and followed by the actual numbers driving the 23-24 budget. And I'd like to begin by showcasing our band up at the high school, who's also kicking off a theme really for our presentation this year. If you will indulge me just for about 30 seconds here. I'm going to stop share and make sure I shared this correctly. And a big shout out and thank you to our video production class, Mr. Hogan and his students, Mr. Brooks and our amazing performers. And this is really a sneak peek for everybody and an invite to join us tomorrow night at the high school at 6:30 for our spring conference. So I did want to take that opportunity to give you a sneak peek at it and send the invite out. As many of you who know me, I speak a lot about grit. And when I speak, I refer to grit quite often because I see so much in our students, our staff, our Board of Ed in this city. Grit is, for those of you who may not be familiar with the term, is passion and perseverance over time. And our story this year is about perseverance as we've exited the pandemic over the past 2 years that every school district in this country has experienced. And so to begin sharing some of our assessment data and our tale of perseverance with us tonight is our very own Director of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Rafferty.
Good evening, everyone. So traditionally, we may look at the bar graphs that you normally see in any achievement update. And we have had a nice story in the past of nice, consistent growth over time. But today, I want to give you a glimpse of why we think we persevered when everyone else was very worried about kids coming out of pandemic. Investments Derby has put into its school district is bearing fruit. So one way to look at it is we just compare ourselves to the Alliance districts to start with. Every other Alliance district except 2 had their students slip. And Derby was one of only 2 districts that in English language arts, we actually grew coming out of the pandemic. You cannot find that as a common occurrence. It's very, very rare. If I switch it and say, well, how big a difference is that? If I randomly take 2 neighbors, you can see the difference between our performance and 2 random neighbors. If I look at it through 2 districts that are mentioned a lot in the budgetary process, you'll see the same story, that the gap between our performance, the investment we've made in education, is bearing fruit. The story is true in math as well. If I look at the pandemic recovery in our students in math, now please note that we have just implemented new curriculum resources. And by nature, according to most research, you'll see schools take a dip. Well, we're still in the top 4, and only one Alliance district made growth coming out of the district. But more importantly, you can see when you compare us to neighbors, there was a significant drop. And we were investing in curriculum and changing teacher programming, and we still saw our students persevere. Our teachers guided our students out of the pandemic to really persevere and grow, as opposed to other districts. Once again, if I refer to other ones that were mentioned previously, you'll see a big gap between themselves and us. If I change the view a little bit, there's an activity we do in the new math curriculum called Which One Doesn't Belong. So if you look at these 4 districts, one of them is the state, you'll see one doesn't belong, and it's the one in the middle, Derby. Derby has not gone down. It has started to tick upward coming out of the pandemic. And it doesn't matter how you look at it and which one you look at. It doesn't matter. I can randomly take districts. The story will be the same here as it will be in math. If I change the lens a little bit and say, well, what about students who are English language learners? Those are a challenge for most districts. You can see here in Derby, not only are we at the top, but we continue to trend upward. So our district, our teachers are meeting children who already have challenges with language and taking them to persevere coming out of the pandemic. Another bright spot for us is at the high school level, we've put in more rigorous programming like advanced placement or dual college credit classes or early college experience. We've increased the amount of students taking that, and more importantly, the amount of kids passing those assessments has given up. Mind you, coming out of the pandemic, which if I look at our neighbors, that's not the same story. And you may have read some of the press releases to know, like, when you look at all the Commissioners Network school, our middle school had the highest percentage of target achieved for ELA and math. If I look at our high school, we are one of, now I go statewide, look at all the districts statewide. We're one of only 22 districts who saw a rise in ELA and one of only 28 districts who went up in math. And most importantly, one of only 15 who did it in both. So the investment that the board has put, the direction and strategic planning, we believe helped us persevere coming out of the pandemic. And just to put a little bit of the cherry on the top, we have schools of distinction. We have 3 of them in 4 years. It's really 3 because 1 year they didn't do it. So our district is really proud of the work our teachers and students are doing. So I'm here to help explain how that's bearing fruit for us. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Conway.
The next 3 slides I have here, just as a reference for you, that if there was a question by anybody, either reading the paper, listening to an audio recording, or attending the meeting, or any members of this committee, if there was ever a question of us not providing our measurable goals and objectives, it's just not the case. So many members on this committee were members on the committee back in April of 22, when at the April 5th meeting, our goals and objectives were referenced and asked for. And if we had provided them, that there would have been a significant increase in spending. 2 weeks later, when we did our budget presentation, we not only shared out, but we reviewed our measurable goals and objectives with the committee, and then followed it up the very next day, as the chairman at the time, Mr. Polis, had asked, followed it up the next day with some more detail, some reference to particular slides, and of course, my cell phone number to call anytime if anybody had further questions, wanted to sit down and review our goals and objectives for at that time, the 22-23 school year, this current school year, to answer any questions. And when I say anytime, that is anytime, day, evening, weekends, midnight or 10 in the morning or 5 on a Sunday, please call and let's schedule some time to review. What I've linked, as we did last year in these slides, is, well, you have the goals and objectives in front of you on these slides and in the documents we sent out for this meeting. There's links to our, not only our 22, but our 23 goals and objectives as well. I don't want to take your time tonight, though I will, if the committee wishes, to go through each of our 11 goals and objectives and what they're aligned to in terms of our assessment scores and funding. So all of this is aligned to the assessment scores and funding. It's not just a goal that sits on a piece of paper. These are developed in concert internally with many stakeholders, as well as externally with the State Department of Ed. We sit down with the State Department of Ed at a minimum of once every 2 weeks to review our goals, our objectives, their alignment to the funding, and then evidence is drawn from visits to classrooms. And this is every 2 weeks. And we get a report from that, of which I attached a snapshot of a report at the end of the slides for the objectives. But only if the committee wishes, I will go through each one tonight or schedule time after you've had a chance to review them further. But we did send all of these out to you. They are linked here. As you heard earlier, they're linked onto our website as well. And they're on the state website for anybody and everybody to view. So I'll leave it up to the chairman whether we go through each of these individually or move on in our slide presentation.
If I may ask, just a sign of yay or nay to allow this from the board. All in favor of having all 11 read tonight, say aye. Anybody against wanting to read this?
And then there's just an iPhone that says.
Dr. Conway, I would ask for you to read it, but if I may ask everybody who's on the call, in respect to hearing what needs to be said, can everybody mute themselves, please, because we're hearing some background noise. Thank you.
All righty. So number on 1.1, so we have these in 4 different buckets: talent, academics, culture, climate, and operations. And these are 4 buckets that we use statewide to really place the goals and objectives in meaningful areas so we know what we're measuring and what we measure them up against. In this particular 1.1, the district will continue to support classroom teachers with job-embedded coaching in literacy and numeracy to improve Tier 1 instruction and strengthen the delivery of Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. So Tier 1 is your main instruction. Tier 2 and 3 are interventions we use for students who might need additional support. Instructional coaching will be overseen by the Director of Teaching and Learning, that's Dr. Rafferty, and delivered by reading and math specialists. Professional development will be geared toward standards alignment, use of high-quality instruction and engagement protocols, technology integration, and differentiated instruction. Teachers in grades K through 10 will receive explicit training and support to administer diagnostic reading assessments, implement research-based curriculum resources, and provide small group instruction to improve foundational reading skills, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. And these are all measured against the ARESA goal targets that are provided to us by the State Department of Education with regards to growth in English language arts. So you heard Dr. Rafferty reference our growth in ELA as well as math. And we set targets that we all work toward with our students to meet by the end of each school year. And those targets are moving targets each year. 1.2 is retention of top talent. We seek to recruit, but more importantly, seek to support, and through that support, maintain the top talent that we have in our district, in front of our kids every day, in every aspect of this district. Our teachers, to our custodians, to our nurses, to our secretaries, to our tutors, to our kitchen staff, our administrators. I mean, everybody you can imagine throughout the district, our SSOs, they all support what's going on in our classrooms. It couldn't happen without them. They're absolutely amazing. And a reminder, in September of 20, they were one of a few districts in this state and really in this country that returned to full in-person without question to support our kids, sacrificing their own families' safety for our kids. So the district will build the capacity of beginning teachers with a strong induction program while creating leadership experiences for high-performing teachers to demonstrate a commitment to lifelong learning and career growth within the district. Derby Public Schools will continue support and development of a strong multi-year support program for all teacher induction phase to promote a cycle of continuous growth. The district will continue to support a guiding coalition, high-quality instruction comprised of teacher leaders and administrators to develop a common vision of high-quality instruction. What does it look, sound, and feel like in our classrooms? And engage our top talent in district leadership experiences. And again, we are measuring this by the SS goals given to us by the State Department of Ed. And each school, in addition to these district goals, each school now has similar goals specific to their school though. So we have the district level measurable goals as well as school level measurable goals. 2.1, we now move into the academics. This is Common Core Aligned Curriculum and Assessment System. The district supports the research, review, and implementation of various high-quality, standards-aligned instructional resources in ELA and mathematics. ELA focuses on the use of high-quality materials with rigorous text complexity, quality tasks, and alignment to reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language standards using expeditionary learning, also referred to as EL resources. In mathematics, the focus is on promoting focus, coherence, and rigor, including conceptual understanding, procedural skills, and fluency and application of skills through the use of illustrative math resources. The district continues to utilize iReady as an adaptive diagnostic assessment in grades K through 8 for ELA and mathematics to give teachers real-time data about student learning needs. So instead of waiting to the once a year SBAC assessment, we're doing this throughout the school year. In addition to formative assessments that are done on a daily and weekly basis by our amazing teachers. iReady instruction used to provide personalized lessons to address learning gaps and put all students on a path to proficiency with clear, measurable goals. One of the greatest things is students from this data setting their own goals. So you have your district goals, your school level goals, you have your student level goals, all aligned to the same resources. 2.2 is a pre-K through grade 3 literacy. Without reading, instead of reading this entire slide to you, I'm going to give you a better picture of it. Derby was selected amongst all districts across the state who applied to be part of a pilot program. It was initiated by the State Department of Ed and the organization that I had the privilege this year to be president of. That's the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. And we were selected from all the districts that applied to be part of a pilot science of reading mastery program. And what that's doing is providing our already amazing teachers and coaches and administrators, including myself at the table side by side with our amazing teachers and staff to learn even more about something they know a significant amount about, and that is the science of reading. What can we do even better in our classrooms every day? How can we as a cohort within Derby, working with additional cohorts throughout the state, become even better at teaching reading at the pre-K through 3 grade level specifically? So it's just an absolute pleasure. And I've shared this across the state and most recently to our legislature. It's probably the single greatest professional development I've had the opportunity to be part of in the last decade. And I'm just so fortunate to be able to do it side by side with our amazing educators and with a small group of other districts throughout the state who are fortunate enough to have been selected. But that selection was based upon our prior actions and demonstration of our commitment to early learning for our kids, to include the establishment of a pre-K program. And I'll show more in our presentation on the results of the testing of students who actually have attended our pre-K program as opposed to other programs. 2.3 is to support the specialized populations. We've heard testimony during our public portion of how well our amazing educators and staff support our specialized populations. Derby Public Schools provides an in-district Tier 3 intervention program called Raise Academy. You heard Mr. Kurtica speak to Raise Academy and his visit there yesterday. Located at Derby High School, up to 20 students. That has now grown this year, believe it or not. So this was written at the beginning of the year. That is now 45 students enrolled in it in grades 9 through 12 who benefit from a smaller, more individualized school setting. Raise Academy offers academic instruction, access to the arts, behavioral support, and individualized counseling services. The Learning Center programs, in addition to Raise Academy, have been expanded at Derby Middle School as well to provide similar academic, behavioral, and emotional supports for students who are receiving them at the elementary level. So while we had learning centers at the elementary level, those students have moved up into the middle school and high school, need additional supports to be as successful as all of our other students. We're providing that level of additional support, which is very individualized. In addition to credit recovery, which is available through Apex Learning, the district supports a continuum of services for students to participate in specialized in-district programs, including autism, spectrum disorder learning centers, called ASD, as well as behavioral learning centers referred to as BLCs. I'll refer more to our the savings that we've been able to provide to this community, 3.9 million actually, because of this last section here, because of the amount of focus that has been given to this particular area to bring by our special education supervisors, Mr. Nichols and Ms. McCourt, to bring more students in district, saving literally $3.9 million to the taxpayers. We move on to culture and climate and culture. 3.1 is our suspension rate. The district continues to support PBIS and a comprehensive approach to behavior management, including common rules and expectations that support a positive, predictable, and safe environment across all districts, all settings. The district utilizes climate specialists to support all students and provide behavior interventions to reduce out-of-school suspensions. And I'll show you more data on our in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspensions as it relates to our mobile population. Attendance, chronic and absenteeism. This is a goal throughout many districts throughout the state, using state and national resources. As an example, Attendance Works happens to be one of them. We will continue to develop a strong district and school level attendance awareness campaign monitored through regular school and district attendance meetings focused on decreasing chronic absenteeism by identifying students exhibiting early warning indicators, providing personalized outreach, and removing barriers to regular attendance, recognizing good and improved attendance. Again, all of that tied to our both English language arts test scores, as well as our mathematics provided to us by the State Department of Education. 4.1, we now move on to operations. So technology integration, the district continues to support the use of technology with a one-to-one laptop program in grades K through 12 that truly bridges the digital divide by providing 100% connectivity both inside and outside of the classroom. Our IT department, amazing, by the way, will continue to employ the proper level of staffing to support our one-to-one laptop program. We're getting better and better at this every year. We've actually been able to, believe it or not, while maintaining the excellence in this particular department, reduce IT staffing overall. So we were able to ramp up over the past 2 years to go from 6-12 to pre-K-12. We actually have to modify this goal to pre-K-12, while at the same time reducing our staffing in this particular department. Again, all of this supports increases in our ELA and math with regards to the goal targets set by the State Department of Ed. Students can work on this wherever and whenever, whether it's practice, whether it's activities being provided to them by their teachers or otherwise, in order to support the classroom learning and practice and get better at and ready for any assessments that teachers may provide. Again, 4.2, student enrollment process. Again, the district will continue to support online student enrollment process, empower school to streamline school registration process. This will remove the burden of paper and redundancy of documents, copies, I will say opportunity for error when you're working with paper, and while minimizing the manual information input by our amazing secretaries. And the process will also keep families informed about their application progress, eliminate language barriers that may exist for families, as well as reduce the time it takes for a student to start a new school. And this is so important when we know 1/3 of our population is new to our district. 4.13 rather, operations supports. The district will continue to employ 5 SSOs. This is such an important part of what we do, so that all of our students, all of you online tonight, all of our parents feel safe in our schools. We have the most amazing 5 individuals any district in this country could ask for, keeping watch over our kids and staff every single day. And again, if you feel safe, you're going to be able to perform better. This is just an example, Chairman. Now, I've gone through our objectives. This is just a snapshot of a portion that I took a screenshot of the one of the sections of the forms that is completed bi-weekly by outside individuals from the State Department of Ed, providing us with feedback after they have visited classrooms. How is the instruction aligned to the goals and objectives, to the funding tied to the goals and objectives? And they collect real-time evidence and give us feedback on it as well. So it's not just our eyes, it's outside eyes looking in every 2 weeks to make sure we're on track. And this is just another example of the amazing things going on in our schools. In March of 22, the NEASC, which is now the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, came in to give us an evaluation of what's going on at our high school. In March of 22, in November of 22, the high school was granted accreditation by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. I mentioned earlier, mobility matters, 3rd year matters, and we say this a lot in our presentations. I just want everybody to kind of get a picture of population in our schools that has grown over the past 20 to 25 years as the housing market in Derby has also changed. And this just shows you hear us talk about of scale scores. And as Dr. Rafferty highlighted, the growth we've seen in our scale scores. He was referring to our SBAC scores in ELA and math. So this is our math, an example of our math. This is students who have no moves. They're in our district. They've been in our district since the start. This represents students with one move. So one move means a student moving into our district represents that one move. And this information was taken just this past week from the State Department of Ed website, which provides us data on one move, two move, or 3+ moves. And those students as a cohort, they're in Derby, their SBAC scale scores in math. You see it start to creep down. 2 moves, a more significant, incrementally going down. 3 or more moves, you see a significant drop off in that cohort of students, which again, together, they represent 1/3 of our population today. SBAC scale scores for ELA, it's the same story. It's a decline, a significant decline in scale scores from students with no moves to students with 3 or more moves, just a downward trend. As we see a downward trend in our SBAC scores, we see an upward trend in our school suspensions. I mentioned earlier, I provide more information on the school suspensions, but this is it. It's a significant incline with each move that a family, that a student experiences and how it impacts them in their learning. If they're not in school, if they're in the suspension, inside or outside, they're not in the classroom. And you can see what's happening with each move for our students. Again, over 1/3 of our population is in this cohort of students. Attendance, same thing. We're seeing a decline, just like your test scores, you're seeing a decline in their attendance rates. So you go from a 95% with those students with no moves, 1 move down to 93, 2 moves down to 93.5, stays the same, and a significant drop off of students with 3 or more moves. ELA and math, this is, now I talk, that was mobility matters. This is 3rd year matters. And I literally have another slideshow of over 45 slides going through but I won't play that tonight. I promise, every single grade level using both SBAC as well as iReady assessments. This represents the average scale score, again, which is the best score to use when you're looking at growth over time with any, whether it's SBAC, whether it's SAT. We're looking at the scale scores. This represents the students with less than 2 years in the district. This represents the scale score. You can see the significant difference of students with more than 2 years in the district. That's why the 3rd year matters. That's ELA, this is math. It's the same picture, every assessment, math or ELA, every grade level in the district. You'll see the exact same story. Percent of identified students as high needs. So you've heard me share again, the more moves, the more students that are identified through the State Department of Ed as students with high needs. As a cohort, students with no moves, only 14.17%. Students with just one move in their academic career, it jumps to 68.57%. Students with 2 moves, 86.05. The students with 3 or more moves in our district, 100% of that cohort are identified as high need students. And we know to support these students, it costs more to provide the same level of education to our high need students as it does our non-high need students. It's just a matter of fact. Again, students identified with disabilities. No moves that are in our district, 19.4%. 1 move, it goes up 6%, 25%. 2 moves, 32.56, and you can see 3 moves, 33% for that entire cohort. You wonder why, when you ask yourself, if you saw in the prior week where 2 other districts were referenced, and I'll share more information about their special education identification rates, but they're at 16 and 17. they don't have the number of individuals moving into and moving out of and back into their district as Derby does. It's a completely different demographic due to housing. Years in district, again, just another example, whether it's the SBAC scores that I shared earlier or your SAT scores, it's the same story. Year 2 to year 3, so less than 3 years, you're in year 1 or 2 in our district, 2 or more, more than 2 years, which means 3 or more, you see a significant jump in their SAT scores. Much more aligned to the average throughout the state. When you filter these particular variables that we experience within our district, and that is the number of high need students due to the mobility of our population. And we can see, while every single year you see growth for the cohort of students, the longer they've been in the district, the better they do. The biggest jump is from year 2 to year 3. And that's why third year matters, whether it's ELA, or math. And these are their live SAT scores. We measure everything that we do. This is a 5-year SBAC trend for high need students. Again, representing over a third of our population, which is factored into all of our assessment data that you saw tonight, is inclusive of our high need and non-high need students together. So while Derby, which represents this first column, has seen a growth in the SBAC scores over a 5-year period of time for our high need students, 2 other districts that have been mentioned throughout this budget process by others, not by the Board of Education, 5.1% decline and a 10.1% decline respectively in the scores of high need students in those districts. Transient enrollment. So you wonder, you mentioned high need students, we mentioned the mobility factor. What does that represent in our district? Just since September 1st, so after all of your new enrollments are completed during the summer, after all your new enrollees into kindergarten, we then look at those who are enrolling after September 1st to now, and those who are enrolling in district after a month in after October 1st to now. And the October 1st date is critical because the state funds you based upon your October 1st account from the previous year, not any student after that. For Derby, 267 first-time entries that entered between 9/1 and current, so just the other day. I had Sarah Bernstein run this information for me in the past couple of days. Again, but we look at this all the time, but this is new data. Just since, as you'll see from our budget presentation, just from October 1st to date, 85 students. And remember, those are not factored into the funding, into our funding, which is your October 1st count from the prior year. Again, re-entry into the district. And why this is important, these were first-time entries. So we know these students represent, at a very minimum, 1 move, but many of them 2 moves or 3. In this group of students, we know that they represent at a minimum 2 moves. And we saw the percent of high need students from just 1 move at 68% to now 2 moves or more represents 86.05%. In both of these groups is those with 3 or more moves at 100% identified as high need. How many exited the district? Many people would then ask after seeing that slide, 101, which gives us a delta of a total gain of 211 students after the school year started that we are now responsible for, and that our amazing staff receive in on a daily basis, make adjustments, differentiate the lessons in the classroom beyond your normal tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 instruction that they have to do. So they're inducting into classes new students as well as trying to get them up to speed. And as we see from the growth data, many students identified with the additional moves, as we saw from the previous data, are not at grade level. They are below grade level. 2 to 3 grades below the level. I now just want to take a couple minutes to share per pupil expenditure. It has been shared throughout this budget process as a measure of one district. It might be 21 for us, 21,468. For two other districts, 17,000 and change and 16,000 and change respectively. Per pupil expenditure is not a good indicator of when you're trying to compare district to district spending. It doesn't tell you anything that's going on in a district, let alone anything to do with assessment scores. Per pupil expenditure is inclusive of every dollar we spend on anything, whether it was local dollars, whether it was state dollars or federal dollars. As our board is incredible at, they go after grant dollars. That takes time, takes staffing to do, takes dedication from our amazing staff to identify and then put together these grants, but they do it. And we receive a significant amount of grant funding, federal and state, that again is inclusive in our per pupil expenditure that may not be inclusive in other districts that have been mentioned because they're not going after the same grants. That could be a security grant, a construction grant, instructional material grant, our alliance, our IDEA. There's just so many grants out there available that we go after that are all added to our per pupil expenditure. And you say, well, if you're going after all this, then that should improve all your scores. And it does, but you can't compare our per pupil expenditure to another district like that. The fact they may not be going after it, it's not added to their per pupil expenditure. We also receive that funding and it's divided out amongst our number of students, which is increased since this data was first ran, but let's use 1,248 as that number, as I do in a later slide. So when we're receiving a grant in for special education, for example, when we're paying out tuition to a provider for special education for our students, that 97,000 that we're paying for that outplacement, I can only divide that amongst 1,285 students because that's my school population. Two other districts mentioned can divide it amongst their population, that same 97. It's the same fixed cost to us as it is them. So their per pupil expenditure for that expense is far less than ours because they can divide it out amongst a larger population, yet it's a fixed cost. Just like many of our grants we received are fixed amounts for programs that we otherwise would not be able to offer, and I'll get into one of those in a second as well. But this is just a quick math example of why you can't use per pupil expenditure as that comparison. Because if I can divide it out amongst a greater number of students, that same dollar is spent, but it looks like I'm spending less per student, when I'm actually spending the same amount per the student that is outplaced. And all of this is factored into your total per pupil expenditure. So let's take this as an example. Our per pupil expenditure is actually 21,468.92. If you take that same math, those other two districts per pupil expenditure should be 16,589 and 15,613 respectively, but they're not. They're actually 17,395 and 17,402. If we equalize it by increasing their special ed population to the same as ours, now taking this times the 22 times this times the 22% and dividing it by this, we all come out with the same per pupil expenditure when we compare apples to apples. But because they're currently spending at a higher rate than what should be over here when you compare it to our per pupil expenditure, if this makes any sense at all, they're actually spending 805,000 more, 805 more per student and 1788 more per student than we are in Derby when you actually compare apples to apples. And that's why you can't use that as a good indicator at all. Let's then look at something else that was talked about over the past week. I've talked about our high need population. Listen, I'm just putting this out here to compare our high need populations and our spending. Your per pupil expenditure for your high need population. So this represents the portion of your population of high need students. And as you can see, these 3 blue dots represent 3 of our 4 schools. No other dots are beyond this. Any of the other schools in both the other districts have less of a high need population in all their schools. The higher above this line represents the higher spending. So here you might see that we're up a little bit higher from these 2 schools, but what you can also see is there's a greater percent of your high need population in all 3 of those schools. That's the explanation for the increased funding. Somebody may say, well, where does that increased spending go? Well, when you go to the State Department of Ed website and you look, it's going to instruction and intervention for the high need students. They're part of our family. They're a third of our population. They're our kids that we're educating with those additional funds. It just costs a little more. As you can see from this graph, representing 3 of our schools here, compared to neighboring districts that have been mentioned in comparison with our per pupil expenditure. It's no different than if I showed you this slide, which I took from State Department of Ed data off of Ed site, and said Derby is spending less local dollars per pupil than our neighboring districts that were mentioned in another presentation. I could also say, while we're spending less locally to educate our students, we have an increased responsibility because we have a higher number of students, a higher percentage of students with disabilities living in our district. Just a matter of fact. I could also say that of the 193 districts throughout the state, Derby ranks 150th in terms of local funding for its schools. And here's a link to the State Department of Ed data. But I can't even fairly say to you tonight that just by saying that, that represents, that's a good representation of how our city is supporting our district. There's a story and there's context behind all numbers, including this chart here, and the support for our district. And yes, we love this district. All of us, we fully understand. Every member of our board, every member in our family understands the hardship on our families to increase the mill rate beyond what it is. We know the struggle that represents. That's not what this is about. But I do want to point out the things that have at least been highlighted in the previous week that are not accurate, and not an accurate way to represent any district in this state, never mind comparing them to neighboring districts. Our average, so I talked about, we measure everything. I talked about our early learning child program called Little Writers University. And again, a program where the cost of it is averaged into our per pupil expenditure, yet not a dime of that money comes from local dollars. Not a dime of that comes from our ECS dollars from the state. It only comes from state and federal, multiple state and federal grants that we have written to receive the funding to be able to offer the early learning program at Little Writers University. The results of which our students benefit from year over year. Our district financially benefits from year over year, because when you look at the DIBELS test scores, which is a reading survey that we give all students in grades K1, 2, all the way up to K1 and 2. In 3, they move over to the SBAC assessment. So it's our reading assessment for students in grades K1 and 2. Our students who attend our Little Raiders University are outperforming their peers across the board. And this is at both of our elementary schools, this data represents. So while 30.69% of students that have graduated from LRU are scoring at the 30.69 for composite score, they're outperforming students, their peers who have not attended LRU, and whether it was a non-LRU childcare program, another public program, whether it was a private licensed daycare or nonprofit, whether it was no pre-K, as you can see is the lowest, whether it was a Head Start program. The only group that outperformed just LRU alone were the group that also attended Head Start, meaning when they were birth to 3 prior to attending LRU. So we know how important our Head Start program, which is a federally funded program, is, and then of course attending LRU before they enter kindergarten. But when you compare them to all students in kindergarten, in this particular graph, and the same thing, same results for kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. Secondary to that particular measurement is how many have met their benchmark or above their benchmark. So those attending LRU, 61.54% of those students were either at or above their benchmark with regards to their DIBELS composite score. Non-LRU students, and you can see the rest of the data. The only other group that came close was, again, students who attended Head Start and then LRU. So the benefit to that is these students are performing at a high level in comparison to other students. And as we see, students of high need, and we have every obligation to provide it, do cost us more, which explains our per pupil expenditure. This is just an SBAC scale score. So you wonder, SBAC test, that's given in 3rd grade? No. Well, we took a measure of the first, as we do each year, but this particular slide represents students who are currently in 6th grade. They were the first cohort of students to graduate from LRU. And so now, 6 years later, they took their SBAC test in 5th grade, because we won't have the SBAC results to 6th grade until this spring. This represents current 6th graders, 5th grade SBAC scores. They are still outperforming their peers. So the lift that they received in LRU, they were able to use that lift and maintain it throughout the next 6 years of their education. Again, high performing now. What do others say? I can't tell you how much I love to hear what others say, and as many of us are saying, well, as long as it's good. But no, good or bad, you have to hear it, because both good and bad, you want to learn from and do better. This represents our most recent culture climate surveys that we give every year, as many parents who are on will remember. And this one they just completed in December, so it's hot off the press. But you can see these scores. These are what families in all of our schools are saying about all of our schools. And it's measuring everything from morale to parental engagement opportunities, to physical environment, to belonging, feeling belong, to the safety and emotional support environment, and to teaching and learning. So take a look at these, and now take a look at what our employees are saying about their workplace, their family. From admin support to morale in the schools, again, parent engagement, physical environment, belonging to the family, safety and emotional support, teaching and learning. I would challenge any of us in any of your professions, whether you're working for somebody, whether you own your own business, working for an agency, a nonprofit, a corporation, if you were to get these results back from your clients, from your customers, from your parents, from your employees, I think at the end of the day, you'd say, well, we have a lot to learn, but it appears we're doing a good job as we learn more. So, and I don't care whether you're at 100, you're at 94, at 93. And in our industry, an A is 90 and above. But also, any student will tell you, any adult will tell you, whether I'm getting to 90 or 100, I want to learn more. I want to wake up every day and come back and reprove myself to myself and to others. And that's what our amazing staff do every day. So regardless of these amazing scores, they're back every day at it to learn more and do even better for all of our kids. I'd like to take a moment here, if I could, Mark, if you could, there's 2 students online here with us on the Zoom, TJ and Gio, 2 of our amazing high school students. And if I could, just a short story, and thank you so much for your time as we now transition to look at the actual numbers for 23, 24. But I was driving in the other morning, and I'm going to stop my share here so we can see these individuals. I was driving in the other morning and thinking of and preparing as I'm driving for today's preparation and things that have led up to today's presentation. And a theme that I have regularly used throughout the years, in addition to grit, I tend to go back to certain themes. And if you recall graduation a couple of years ago, we had a theme about Rocky, and in the backdrop behind us were those amazing stairs that Joan Payton built that remind me of the stairs Rocky climbed as he got better and better and prepared for what was ahead of him. And a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to speak at the Alvarola banquet, which is just an amazing tradition and opportunity I get to experience every year. And the highlight for me was speaking to the football players, to the boys, but specifically about their leadership and what they demonstrated, what they inspired me by and taught me during the football season from the opening day on. And that was, there are, listen, hundreds of students that display this same leadership every day in front of us. It's easy to walk through slides of quantitative data and explain it to you as we did tonight. It's more difficult to highlight the qualitative data, the intangible. How are our families, how are our teachers and staff and amazing individuals in our building impacting our students with the intangibles, the qualitative measures? We talk about both quantitative and qualitative measures. I have 2 students with us here tonight, 2 amazing gentlemen, 2 amazing leaders beyond their years. Gio Bissons and TJ Orazzetti. Mark, I don't know if you can spotlight them for us. I know Gio, I can see him down here. Gio, if you can turn your video on, if it's possible. But I'm driving in and I'm thinking about what I was able to talk to them about a couple of weeks ago, and it reminded me of this process in front of us today and their leadership. And it started with a story of, if any of you recall, Rocky VI. And there was a scene there where Rocky was talking to his son. And Holly was actually at the event, as was some others on here, on this call, on this Zoom. And Rocky was talking to his son that sometimes when people are confronted with adversity in life, they immediately look to blame someone or somebody. And that if you know what you're worth, you just go out and get what you're worth without pointing fingers and placing blame on anyone or anything. These 2 individuals that I'm introducing tonight, Gio Bissons and TJ Orazzetti, demonstrated that. And I want to share how. In their first interview, coming off their opening game loss, a 60-0 loss against Ansonia, Gio says to the reporter, yeah, it was a tough loss, but now we're on to Waterbury career. Now we're on to lots of bigger and better things. I think we have something really special going on. And TJ follows up with asking him, you see the scoreboard? That doesn't represent how this whole season is going to be. He actually gives credit to and says Ansonia's a great team. We have learned from that. This was a learning experience. First game back. This was a learning experience. That, both of them, inspired me, and something I think we can all learn from that leadership. But that's a qualitative measure that is a lot of times overlooked when we're only focusing on the quantitative. So I just want to thank Gio. I want to thank TJ. I want to thank all of our amazing students who demonstrate this type of leadership, the intangible, every single day, inside and outside of our schools, on and off our fields. It's amazing to witness. I thank you for your patience in this. And I would just like to go back, share my screen as we go into the budget piece of this, and just in time. I'm going to pause this for a second. I know I need to properly share my screen, as we learned during the setup. They're both checked. Good. And here we go.